This tutorial is part of a YouTube playlist. You can access this and many more of the tutorials in this course. If you do like this YouTube playlist and you want to access the whole course, you can do on Udemy. The link to the YouTube playlist and YouTube course is in the video description. Right, so next up is the product table. If we take a look at the product table, we can see that it has multiple relationships between different tables. As and when we start to build those tables, we will add those relationships to the product table. For now, we'll concentrate on building the main core fields of the product table, and we have already defined the category table. There is a relationship between the product data and the category table. So there is an association. So the product is associated to a category. So we can say that the product data is associated to the category table. Therefore, we've created a foreign key from the category table and the product table. Now, you notice that these foreign keys have these different icons. There's a slash here representing a 1 and this crow's foot at the end. That represents many. So we're saying that we have identified a one-to-many relationship between category and product. Now, when designing your database, you would go through this type of process of identifying the relationship types. And it's important to do that because then that helps you identify certain things like, for example, why we have the category foreign key in the product table and not necessarily the category table, for example. So let's go ahead and build the product table. Back in the models file, let's go ahead and create a new class for product. And again, we're extending from db.models to define the fact, or model, sorry, to define the fact that we are building a model, a database table. So let's define the table name. So that's going to equal, in this case, product. And then we just need to build the fields. So we can start copy and pasting at this point, like I said. So I'm just going to copy the first two fields in the category table. This can sometimes speed things up. The ID is always going to be the same. And we do have a name field for this product. So we can go ahead and just copy and paste the object representation function here to be the name. So that's all good. Right, so looking at the diagram, which you can't see, but I'm looking at the diagram, we have a separate field called product ID. Okay, so that is a column. And this is where we start to bring in the UUID. Now, if you remember in the previous step, when we created the database, we added an extension, the UUID extension, and that allowed us to create a unique number for this field. So UUID stands for Universally Unique Identifier. It's going to be generating a 128-bit identifier, which is, I think, 32 characters, hexadecimal string. So it's going to be generating a 32 character hexadecimal string. So what's going to be inserted in this field is something that looks a little bit like that. So this is going to represent a product ID. Now we've already got this primary key ID for the product. So why would we build another ID? Well, this is just to simulate the idea that a product ID might be an ID that the actual retailer uses to manage the stock. So it might not use this ID here. This might just be used for queries and to actually query the database, collect data from the database, or used to insert data into a database, etc. Whereas this ID here might be a unique ID that the retailer uses for different stock requirements or administration or auditing. So we just wanted to bring in the idea of utilizing a UUID just to show you how to install extensions. It just gave us a different learning angle. So UUID, we're going to specify UUID here, and then as underscore UUID, this is how we're going to set this up, equals true. So the actual UUID, the actual number, should be generated by the database. That's why we installed the extension. So let's go ahead and comma there. So we're going to specify this unique. So this has to be unique. Now with UUIDs, generally is always going to be unique. There's a really slim chance that it will generate a UUID that isn't unique, but there is a very slim chance, like a 1 in a billion chance that it will be similar. Nullable equals false. So it can't be null, it must be generated. And yeah, so we're going to define the fact that the server will generate this. So let's just get some space so you can see what I'm doing. So here we're going to define server underscore default equals text. So we're representing this UUID that we're going to generate as text. UUID underscore generate v4. So there are different versions of UUID. So we're going to be utilizing UUID version 4. So here we can see there are two resources that we're going to need to include, UUID and text. So let's go ahead and do that. So up here, add in text into the SQL import. And then we're going to need to bring in UUID from SQLAlchemy dialects Postgres SQL. I think it is. So from SQLAlchemy dot dialects and then specify the database. Let's go ahead and import the UUID. There we go. So that then should be generated by the database using the extension that we installed. Now we can have Python generate that before we insert it into the database. That's a different approach. And I think we'll have a look at that approach a bit later. I was trying to show you two approaches there, but this is going to be generated then by the database. Right. So let's continue. We do have a slug next. So I already have that and is active. So I'm just gonna copy that down. Give us a bit more room here. So we have the slug, I think is active a bit later. So slug string, set that at 200. That's not a problem. Now the name of this product might be a bit longer. So we'll set that to 200 and the slug to 255 just to be sure. And now we go ahead and add a description field. The description is going to be a different type of data. So here we're using a string. We define the length of a string here, in this case for the slug or for the name. Sometimes we want a bigger block of text. So for that, we can define a different type of data, and that's going to be text. So this is going to represent an unlimited amount of text we can store within this field. So let's make sure that we bring that in. Text, that's with a capital. So notice that we have a lower that we used previously, and then the text here representing a field which will have an unlimited amount of text potentially stored. Right, so with that done, we have then is digital. So we don't have it. I think we have is active. So is digital is the next item. So is digital. So our product might be digital, in which case we would deal with it separately or differently within our system. So whereas we have shoes and t-shirts, those are obviously products that we would need to post. Whereas digital products, we probably wouldn't need to. So we're potentially going to be selling digital products. So we specify whether the product is digital or not, so we can handle it differently within our system. Sometimes you want to record when the record was created and potentially when the record is updated. And you can store that in fields in your table. So for example, we could create a created at field. We could then go ahead and create a new column, which is a date time field. And then we could have the database server using server default, have the database server actually create the actual timestamp for this field. So we can use current timestamp for that. So this way, whenever we create a new record, what's going to happen is that that's going to then store the current date time the record was created. I suppose it's worth mentioning that, remember, this is going to be taken from the database server. That database server might be in a different country, and maybe you might need to think about how to actually handle that current timestamp based upon that factor, because you might want to create the date time based upon your location rather than where the actual server is located. But okay, let's go ahead and date time this. So date time, let's add this to the imports. Okay, right. So that's the created at. So what we can also do is create an updated at. So this is going to be created once. When we create a new record, it's going to be created once and stored. Now, sometimes you want to keep a record of when the product was last updated, for example. So let's create a new field here called updated at. Again, this is going to be a column, which is going to be a date time column. So this time, again, we're going to ask the server to create this for us. So db.text, and then we'll grab the current timestamp. But this time, we want this to update every single time we make an update to our record. So for that, potentially we can use the onUpdate tool equals db.function .now. So that will grab the current date time and then update that field with the current date and time when the record is updated. Okay, so now we just have the isActive. Same principles apply again. Some products we don't want to show at certain times, so we can set or turn that on and off utilizing this type of logic. So isActive is going to be a Boolean, true or false. So we can query the data, and then we could then filter out any products that have been or that are set to isActive false. Okay, so we got the stock status. So we can include a stock status. So equals column string. So maybe we have some sort of status that the product might be out of stock, might be on order, on back order, etc. So we might want to specify this within our database. So default equals out of. Well, let's specify that as out of stock for now. Okay. So that's stock status. And then let's go for category. So now we need to create our foreign key to the category table like we did before. A new column is an integer. So here in the product table, we're going to store an integer, and that integer represents the ID of the category that we are associating our product to. So I'll explain that in a second. So integer. So this is going to be our foreign key again. And this is going to be a foreign key over to category.id. Okay, so the name of the table and then the field name, ID. So in the product table, we're storing information about the product. So it has an ID, has some other fields, and it has the foreign key relationship, the category ID field. Okay, so ... representing all the other fields that this product will have. So if there is a relationship between a product, this is the product table, if there is a relationship between the product and category, which there always will be, we build that relationship and we identify the ID of the category. So in the category table, if you remember, what we have is a field, the ID field, and that ID is a unique field or contains a unique value for a record. So category 1 might be like we had close. So this is the category table. So what we're doing here with our foreign key is that in the product table, when we build a new product, we will specify the category it's associated to. So what we can do in the category ID foreign key field, we specify the ID of the category that's defined in the category table. So that way, when we query the product, we can, in that query, we can say, well, get all the categories that are associated to, or get the category that's associated to this product. So in that query, we can inspect the category field and then say, okay, so we can use that now to grab the data in the category table, the associated data. Okay, so that's the category table as it stands at the moment. There will be a few other fields that we're going to potentially need to add for all the different relationships. But for now, let's keep it like that and carry on building the other tables. So next up, we'll go ahead and create the product line table. You can see that there is a relationship between product and product line. So we're going to need to deal with that foreign key like we did with the product and category table.